I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm still on vacation, but we're still bringing you the content here. I'm going to talk to you guys today about the Diontae Johnson situation that never was and how it blew up so fast and how I think it relates into a conversation that Steelers fans do need to talk about more often. That, my reaction to the Super Bowl, and how it played out into the narrative that I think that the Steelers are building to being a team that could compete for the Super Bowl based off of how the Chiefs and Eagles play. All that and more right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcast platform, and especially on YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on the video if you enjoy it. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for all listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, now that that's all been said, I want to first start off. We can talk about the crazy Super Bowl because that was a wild game. And I have a lot of thoughts on the things that not only happened in the game, but what the results of the game kind of mean for what the Steelers are trying to do, because I've been talking about that a lot going into this week. But before we do any of that, we have to talk about the Diontae Johnson situation, about a scenario that never even happened. This all started, if you don't know what I'm talking about, with Greg Giannotti, CBS sports analyst, who said on a show during Super Bowl week that Diontae Johnson punched Mitch Trubisky during the Jets halftime game or the halftime of the Jets game where he was replaced by Kenny Pickett. Now, you may sit there and think that, like, well, that's ridiculous. We cleared this up a long time ago, because there was an initial rumor that there was an altercation or a yelling match or something, and it was acknowledged that, hey, yeah, there was like some back and forth there, but as Mike Tomlin said, it was more along the lines of competitive spirits and guys just kind of frustrated with not winning, and that he was perfectly fine with how it was dealt with and how they handled it. Diontae Johnson and Mitch Trubisky both played down to say it wasn't that serious, but here we are with this rumor again. It's Super Bowl week. And Greg Giannotti saying his guy in Pittsburgh was the source for the story. And we have one of our local radio hosts, Andrew Filippone, who owned up to it. He said, hey, I mischaracterized this incident. That's on me. I need to apologize to Diontae Johnson because that was not fair to his character. And I think that's all fine and well. I think that stuff like that happens when you play a game of telephone where you tell somebody something and then they raise it to the nth degree. It happens all the time in rumor building. But I think the big thing to talk about here is how it was so easily believed by a lot of people and quickly spread around. Because anybody, if you went to myself, a lot of people that I've had on this very show, myself, Jim Wexell, Alan Saunders, a lot of the guests that I've been bringing on here, they were like, that never happened. Like, what are we doing here? I look at that situation and I just think it was everyone who kind of was in the know, who goes to the locker room, who talks to the players. They knew that was bogus, but it was so quickly run with here. And I think it ties to the believability that a lot of people have for Steelers wide receivers or, skills position players to be quote unquote divas, or how quickly people turn on them. Now, there's incidents where it's warranted, like Antonio Brown when he was going crazy at the end of his career. He was just out of his mind. But that leaked over to making Le'Veon Bell be crazy. And Le'Veon Bell wasn't crazy. He just bet wrong on how he wanted to handle the end of his contract with the Steelers, thinking that he could get more guaranteed money from someone else. And he got more guaranteed money initially, but obviously taking a year off and going to the Jets wasn't the move. But that's not him being a locker room cancer, him being the ultimate diva. That was just, a bad contract situation. The same thing got labeled on JuJu Smith-Schuster because he liked to do TikTok dances and things. And there things that JuJu did that I thought were not the best moves, sure, but the narrative that he was a diva that couldn't win and he couldn't be part of a winning culture kind of gets crushed by this whole he just won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs thing. And I said this last year about Najee Harris as a skill player. Again, not necessarily just wide receivers, but it seemed like there was a willingness to quickly turn him from the darling that everyone loved in his rookie year because everyone loved how funny he was in interviews and how honest he was about things. And then this year, as soon as things start going well, oh man, he's not tough enough. He doesn't want to run hard and all these other things. He's Trent Richardson. And a lot of people who were in the know were like, hey, maybe not that. Maybe he has this foot injury that we've been talking about. Maybe the offensive line hasn't been blocking well. Maybe this is just an offense that's forming and it's figuring its way out. And then by the second half of the season, it was, oh yeah, that was the story the whole time. You know, and but we've seen now Najee Harris go from again the angel in his rookie season to the guy that people were trying to bag on in his second year season. And I caution you, Steelers fans, this situation is coming up with George Pickens because George Pickens was beloved this year. He was awesome. He made all the amazing catches, and this guy's going to be great. But the second he drops a pass or shows some emotion in a game, there's going to be, oh, there's that diva. He's not really about winning. He's about himself, and that whole narrative's going to get built. The same way it's been about Antonio Brown. Granted, eventually it was warranted, but JuJu Smith-Schuster, Diontae Johnson, Najee Harris, George Pickens, it keeps coming for those guys. And I'm saying that the next time you hear a rumor that's like kind of crazy in that realm, let's pump the brakes. Let's think for ourselves and be like, let me go to the people who are actually in the locker room and what do they actually think? Has anyone else actually reported this happening? And I think we can get past a lot of the nonsense that was during Super Bowl week that sparked up about the Diontae Johnson situation. And listen, like Deontay Johnson, does he have his problems? Sure. He's dropped some bad passes. He didn't score a touchdown this year. He didn't perform as high as I think he could have. Sure, there's things that he says that I think on Twitter that can be like, that seems cryptic, but that doesn't make him a bad teammate or B, a bad player. I think there are things that you could certainly criticize a number of players about, but trying to spread this guy did this crazy thing and he's a diva and he's this wild person without the warrant of the actual information, the actual facts, it's dangerous. And it creates these narratives about players that spin and spin and spin. And even the things that are proven to be incorrect turn into, when something does happen that's a little along the lines, it's a little more innocent, not as crazy as punching a player, but, maybe getting a little upset at a quarterback for messing up, like for throwing a bad pass. Things start to get spread a little bit more than they need to be. And that to me is where, again, if you're trying to be an honest fan or an honest follower of the game, just don't participate in those things. Stick to the people who are in the actual know, and remember to kind of pair the real narratives with what actually happens. So all that said, we can talk about the Super Bowl a bit here. I do apologize. My audio is not the same quality nor is my video, although I think this backdrop is pretty good because I'm in front of a pool again, like I was last year. But hey, this was my vacation. I told you guys this was coming, so I hope you guys understand this is just part of the production of, trying to keep up daily content while on the go and not trying to mess up my vacation plans. So we're going to talk about the Super Bowl a bit because I watched every second of it here, and we'll get to that in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, so don't go anywhere. But first, we got to talk to you guys because this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Now, BetterHelp Therapy Online, we've talked a lot about it here because it is important to show up for yourself whenever you're going through something or even just processing things. And BetterHelp Therapy Online is here to help you connect with professional therapists who can help you be there for yourself and help you fight your way through to be clear-minded and deal with the things that go on in your life. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than just 48 hours. It's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist at any time you want. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you. BetterHelp knows this and makes it easy to free to change your therapist whenever you need. And they have a special offer right now for our listeners. You can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host Chris Carter. We're going to keep the show rolling here, just talking more about the Super Bowl now. Before I get into any things and how I think it connects to the Steelers, let's talk about the actual game itself. I thought this was a great Super Bowl. This was back and forth by both teams, talented plays on both sides of the ball. I thought there were some really important plays made by Patrick Mahomes, winning the Super Bowl 38-35. That guy is such a warrior, man. Like, I think that was the biggest thing that I took away from him was we talk about quarterbacks and great players and great this, but a factor that you have to have, I think, is the toughness to stick in there, to take the big hits, to take the tough moments, to fight through them, and then go and still win the game for your team. And that's what we saw Patrick Mahomes do against the Bengals. That's what we saw him do against the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And he continued to do it with that high ankle sprain, finding ways to move. You could see him limping, you could see him struggling, but he would turn it on and he would get the yards he needed for his team. I thought he really stepped up for the Chiefs big time on every play. And it's just extra impressive because this was a team that was supposed to be without Tyreek Hill. And whereas I think Travis Kelce's going over the top saying, nobody believed in us, when, like, you're the Chiefs, dude. You guys have been the stuff for like 5 straight years now. Relax. But this team did lose Tyreek Hill. There was no superstar wide receiver. JuJu Smith-Schuster was a good wide receiver, and they added Kadarius Toney, who was okay. But this team still was going to run through Travis Kelce, and its running backs weren't exactly tearing up, the league. They're not the guys that you're drafting at the top of fantasy football drafts. So everyone's like, oh man, the Chiefs are going to have an off year. And who made the difference? Patrick Mahomes, and just making the play. I will get to their defense in a bit because they deserve credit too for what they were able to do. But the Eagles on the other side, I thought that they played a heck of a game. I thought Jalen Hurts, he showed why he is the truth, and he's not just a lucky guy who was being carried by a better team around him. You look back at how he produced in this game. He threw for 304 yards. He ran for 70 yards. That's 374 yards of offense, and I think that just shows the 347 out of 417 yards total that the team had. He was putting the team on his back too, and I think you look back at it. He had the one play where I think he cost his team, where he just dropped the ball on a pass rush, and it was scooped and scored by the Chiefs defense. To me, that was a huge part of the game. And it was, I said at the time, I was like, that could be the game changer right there. Maybe not right away because the Chiefs were still down by 10 points at halftime, but those 7 points are going to come back to bite them, and surely enough, they did. But I thought Jalen Hurts had nothing to hang his head about, ran for 3 touchdowns, got the ball to Devontae Smith, got the ball to A.J. Brown. They were able to move the ball, but I think the biggest thing for the Eagles was their defense didn't show up nearly the way that it needed to in making some of the big plays. They never sacked Patrick Mahomes. They never intercepted Patrick Mahomes. And those were some of the big keys. The big things talked about this team coming into this game where, they had the most sacks in the combined, I think, playoffs and regular season since the 85 Bears. And to me, that's why I thought they were going to win. I thought this pass rush was going to get after Patrick Mahomes, and it just couldn't. And again, this is a Patrick Mahomes and this is why I think he deserves so much credit, because he was doing this while hurt, and it was acknowledged that he was hurt. And you can even see during times he took a hit on his ankle, and he came up and he was in pain. You could see that. But for the Eagles to not be able to help themselves on defense with that situation, I think that truly came back to bite them. Again, this is a team that was built on being a balanced roster, not necessarily having to be an offensive team that was always led by that. I think the reason that everyone thought they were going to win, not everyone, but a lot of people like myself who thought they were going to win, was because their defense was going to be able to outperform the Chiefs' defense, and their offense would be able to either keep up with the Chiefs' offense or be able to outperform it. So lots of things there. I think that just didn't work out in the Eagles' favor. I'll talk about the calls, because I saw a lot of people were upset with how some of the calls were made in this game, particularly on the last drive of the game where JuJu Smith-Schuster broke inwards, then broke outwards, and he got his jersey tugged on by James Bradberry, and then there was the hand on the hip where people said, "Oh, he wasn't quitting holding there," and Bradberry gets flagged for it. It gives the Chiefs another chance to get down the field, because that was a third down stop. And a lot of people were complaining about it, saying it's rigged and this, that, and the third. But I was like, guys, like, that was holding. You could see on the replay he pulled it, and James Bradberry even admitted after the game, like, hey, I was holding. I was trying to stop him from getting away from me, because if he did, he was going to score. And you look at the route that he ran. If JuJu did beat him going back to the outside, and if Bradberry doesn't hold on to him, JuJu's going to have the whole sideline and several steps of space, not several steps, but even like 3 steps of space. But we've seen Patrick Mahomes only needs that much. And had Bradberry not held him up, he would have gotten that space pretty quickly. It wouldn't have been a throwaway pass the way it was for Patrick Mahomes. And the Chiefs might have even scored on that play. Who knows? But I still thought that play was legit. I thought this was a really well played Super Bowl, and I think sure, the ending sucked that the Chiefs were just able to wind the clock out, and then just kick a little extra point of a field goal. But still, I thought it was masterfully played. I thought that Andy Reid showed again why he's an amazing coach, and he also credited Eric Bieniemy for calling some great plays in that game, which dispels the myth that Eric Bieniemy doesn't call plays and he's just kind of a placeholder for the offensive coordinator position. But all in all, I thought this was a great Super Bowl to watch. I thought I had a lot of fun watching it. I was kind of torn, because I like the way Patrick Mahomes plays. I like the way Jalen Hurts and the Eagles play. I thought it was just a really hard-fought game. And, I think that there's things that we can tie into where I've been going about the Steelers, where, there's some questions. Can the Steelers hang with any of these types of teams in the near future, with the way that they play? But there are some key stats and some key points that I think if we look at, there were parts of this game where these teams did seem so unbeatable and so efficient with their offense in a way that the average team couldn't keep up with. But there were some factors that I think really played into it, that if the Steelers can accomplish a few things in their roster and make some improvements with some of their younger players next year, they may not be on the Super Bowl stage, but they'll be able to bang with some of those teams a lot more in the regular season than they did this past year, when they were getting smoked by the Eagles and the Bills heading into their bye week. We'll get into that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, because I do want to get you Steelers related thoughts on the on how it played out. So we'll get to there in a minute here. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at FanDuel. FanDuel, of course, is the #1 sports book in America, and even though the NFL season is done, your season with FanDuel doesn't have to be. We're at the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers still get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. FanDuel lets you make player prop bets and gives you so many options. Plus, FanDuel also lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, and let's talk about how this Super Bowl relates to the Steelers. I thought our friend Alan Saunders, Steelers Now, wrote a very interesting column and said, defense doesn't win championships anymore when two teams duke it out in the Super Bowl at 38-35. And I kind of think that there's a way that, just defense can't win you a championship anymore. You do need an efficient offense. But you can still be a great defensive team if you're a great defensive team in the Super Bowl and you're winning that way. I thought one thing the Chiefs did a very good job of, they ran the ball on the Eagles, which was something I thought was going to catch up to the Eagles in the playoffs when I picked the Giants to beat them. I wasn't sure how good Jalen Hurts would be coming off the bye after being injured late in the season. And I was thinking, man, if the Giants can get Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones going, that's the Eagles' kryptonite. And even though Patrick Mahomes did throw 3 touchdowns, you go back and you look at the rushing numbers for this game. The Chiefs ran the ball 26 times for 158 yards. That's 6.1 yards per carry. And it wasn't just Patrick Mahomes on some of those scrambles. Isaiah Pacheco, 15 carries, 76 yards. That's over 5.1 yards per carry. Jerick McKinnon, 4 carries, 34 yards, 8.5 yards per carry. The Chiefs had a balance that I think that messed up the Eagles, because the Eagles, they could get after the quarterback, they could cover well in the secondary, but if you could run the ball efficiently, that was a big problem for them. And I think it saved the Chiefs in some of their tougher moments when Patrick Mahomes needed to recover. Like coming out of the half, go back and look at the drive that the Chiefs had coming out of the half, because I thought when they got the ball back, I was like, man, like, how's Patrick Mahomes going to look? But you go back to the first several plays, Isaiah Pacheco, 7-yard run. Pacheco, 2-yard run. McKinnon, 14-yard run. Then Patrick Mahomes hits Travis Kelce with a solid short pass over the middle. Then Sky Moore, another 4-yard run. Another pass, and then another run from Jerick McKinnon. And you saw that balance that came in, and they were able to work their way down to the 1-yard line where Pacheco eventually punched it in. And I thought that was going to be something that they might not have time to do if the Eagles were able to get up on them. And the Eagles did get a 10-point lead, but again, if we're talking about defenses and the importance here, the Chiefs' defense really came through. They got to score a defensive touchdown. They sacked Hurts twice in this game, where the Eagles got no sacks on Patrick Mahomes, and that turnover. If the Chiefs' defense doesn't get that fumble, scoop, and score in the first half, we're talking about a 17-point lead going into the half, and that's much tougher for the Chiefs to have to work with. And again, you look at the Eagles side of the ball, they never were able to get the run going consistently with the running backs to kind of keep controlling the game. I thought that the Eagles did a great job of possessing the football through much of the game, but the problem was they were only up 6 after doing so for such a long time. In the game, the Eagles outpossessed the Chiefs 35 minutes and 47 seconds to 24 minutes and 13 seconds. And I think a big part of that came down to they were playing the script that they wanted, but in that second half they had that long drive in the third quarter that took about over half the time off the third quarter clock, but they weren't able to run the football after that, and they had a 3-and-out to start the fourth quarter. They did have an impressive drive to take the lead back late in the fourth quarter, but setting up the Chiefs with over 5 minutes and 15 seconds to play and only up a single possession, that's where you didn't want to be, because then you're giving Patrick Mahomes the chance to actually they tied the game with the touchdown, but that's where you didn't want to be. You wanted to be in control of this game, keep playing from ahead so that your defense could pin its ears back and get after Patrick Mahomes, and they just weren't able to do that. Now, how does that relate to the Steelers? I think the Steelers are building towards being a type of roster that can compete the way the Eagles compete. I think they want to stop the run ball, they want to stop the run better than the Eagles did this past season, and I think that's a big thing that they do need to achieve. I think that there were some times the Eagles linebackers were getting toasted in some rough situations, Um, but by and large, I think that you saw this the way the Eagles played defense this year. Hassan Reddick was a huge player for them in the NFC Championship game for the way he was able to get after the quarterback. Fletcher Cox in that defensive line consistently getting after people, and that secondary being able to run with whoever. And when the defensive front was getting a pass rush, was getting after guys. Um, when the defensive rush is getting after guys, that secondary is able to feed off of it, and that kind of worked. The Steelers, I think, want to be a similar type of defense. They're paying T.J. Watt to stick around. We'll be interested to see how they handle the Alex Highsmith conversation this offseason as he enters the final year of his contract. They draft another edge rusher this year? As far as the defensive line, they have Cam Hayward. How do they continue to invest in the interior of the defensive line? Their linebacker situation, how do they show that up? Because again, they want to stop the run, but that's on top of getting after the quarterback and being able to make plays in the secondary. I think they have Micah Fitzpatrick is fine for being their ace in the secondary. I think they need another cornerback, a starting cornerback type of player to add to this roster who's young. This is why I keep advocating for them to draft a cornerback in the first 2 days of the draft this year, and we'll see if they do. But I think that that's part of the formula that needs to be there. And the Eagles, they had the formula to win this game. It just didn't work out that way. The same way not every game works out for the Chiefs. The Chiefs lost in the AFC Championship game last year. They could have lost it this year. But I still think that the style that the Steelers want to get to, great defense and efficient offense that runs the football, that's still the key here. And in this playoff game, or in this Super Bowl, excuse me, the Eagles couldn't grind it out with their run game. Jalen Hurts was able to kind of bust loose, but credit to Chris Jones and Nick Bolton, who I think that they played a great game for the Chiefs defense in limiting Kenneth Gainwell to 3 yards per carry, Miles Sanders to 2.3 yards per carry, and Boston Scott, to 2.7 yards per carry. The run game wasn't a factor. The Chiefs kind of had to win one-dimensional, and that was through Jalen Hurts. In a way, yes, the Chiefs defense did give up 35 points, but they were able to kind of keep the game in pace for what the Chiefs offense were able to do, where Patrick Mahomes only threw for 182 yards, and they still won the football game. So, all that to being said, I think that the Steelers are in a position right now where they still have a lot of work to get there. They have to hit on at least 2 of these 3 picks in the top 80, or the top 50, excuse me. 2 of these 3 picks in the top 50, and heck, 3 of the 4 picks in the top 80, where I think 2 of those guys need to be almost immediate starters, and then the other 2 guys, or at least one of the other 2 guys, need to develop into guys who eventually become good contributors early on. So, there's pressure on the Steelers. It's not going to be easy to get there, but I also don't think it's as far away as people make it out to be if they make the right moves. Just a few years ago, the Eagles were a 4-win football team with Jalen Hurts, and everyone thought that he was a joke and he wasn't as good as he was, or as the Eagles thought he was. Now he's out there playing his heart out for the Eagles, and I thought he had a terrific game. Just one bad play where he cost his team 7 points, and some bad circumstances where it just didn't work out his way. But I think that he'll be back in the big game at some point. I think that the Eagles, if they can keep that core together, they'll be a terrific team next year as well. And the Steelers would love to be in that position. So I do think the Steelers, if they're going to get back to competing soon, it's going to be trying to build the way that the Eagles are, even though the Eagles lost this Super Bowl. I think they still need to. Kenny Pickett still needs to take steps forward. George Pickens needs to take steps forward. Pickett needs to develop better chemistry with Diontae Johnson. The offensive line still needs to improve by a good bit. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren need to keep growing as a 1-2 running back punch. But all those names, I didn't even bring up Pat Freiermuth. There's a lot of hope and a lot of room to grow for those players. And I think that that's where Steelers fans, if you want to find something to kind of look at and say, hey, there's a chance that if a few things click the right way, the Steelers could be back in the playoffs and actually a competitive team in the playoff, and not the 7th seed that just goes in and gets crushed by the 2 seed in the first round, the way they've been the last 2 years ago when they lost to the Chiefs in that situation. But as I said, I'm on vacation, so I'm going to try to get back to that very soon. But I wanted to record something, get something out for you guys here on on this Monday. I'm gonna try to get another show for you guys to be up Tuesday morning. Not so sure because I got to travel really early Tuesday, but we will have a full show Wednesday. So stay tuned here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Again, sorry for any audio or video quality issues if you had any, but I hope that you were able to enjoy the show. Understand that I'm trying to do this thing on the go here, and hope that you guys have a great start to your week. We'll be starting up our mock drafts next week. Our mock draft Mondays next week. So be on the look for those posts to see what your mock draft. If your mock draft can get on the show, I'll be giving my first mock draft at the start of next week. But we'll have a lot of talk about that heading into the NFL Combine, which is just a few weeks here. So, lots to break down still on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Again, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Carter Critiques. You can also read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I cover Pitt athletics. You can also find this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, or anywhere podcasts are hosted, and especially on YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily episodes. When I'm back in my studio, if you're new to the show, when I'm back in my studio, it's a lot smoother than this. So I do apologize if this is your first experience, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back soon with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.